you look pretty. You look handsome?
Hello.
And talk to them.
Oh, I forgot how much I like that.
Today's episode is sponsored by Fuego.
Except that it's not sponsored by them. But we recommend them.
Not oranges.
Why can't you have oranges right now?
Because we got sick.
Yeah, you have bacteria.
Yeah, and then
So, we're doing a video about our recent hospital visit here in Bolivia. And it is quite a different experience than it is in Canada.
Yeah, just to kind of give other people some information, because when we were looking for information on hospitals and clinics and doctors and how healthcare is out here, it was quite difficult to find any information. And so for someone who is wanting to come out here and has an emergency, that they need to be hospitalized or go to a clinic or whatever the case is, that there's some information out there. We don't have all the information. This is just from our experience.
it hurt on my butt. It hurt on my butt. Why he put needles on her butt? I put needles on.
When you go to a different country, your bodies are used to the country that you live in and not so much in other countries. You struggle a whole lot more physically. There's different bacteria, different germs, and you have to accustom your body to it. We've had heat issues, we've had fungus issues on the kids, and now we had a situation that had to do with bacteria. Evie got a fever and she worked her body through it and was good. Within 2 days, she was right back to normal. And then Isabeau, she got it the next day and her fever was definitely more intense. So I took her to the clinic and they brought the fever down. After she started feeling better, then Titus got it, and his fever was even worse. After our appointment, we went straight to the hospital pretty much, right?
Yeah, very close.
Yeah, and we didn't know what hospital, we didn't know very much information about what there was in Santa Cruz. So we went to, opened a taxi and we said we need a hospital for our kid, and at the time Isabeau was going downhill again too, so then we were like, we're just gonna bring them both in for an eval. Yeah, the taxi suggested a hospital and he took us there quite rapidly. So yeah.
So you check in. It's a fairly normal procedure. You go in with the fever. They were considered an emergency, and you check in. It's all pretty basic. One thing to keep in mind is the hospital doesn't actually have test things like they would in other hospitals.
Yeah,
you have access to the laboratory where all the tests are done. So that's one thing to keep in mind.
You had to take your kids out of the ER and bring them to a lab to get testing done. Mm-hmm. And then you came back after the results.
Yeah.
But the ER itself was, that was pretty traumatizing. The kids, this is also, hospitals here you have to pay for, right?
Mm-hmm.
But for children, it didn't seem like you did.
Mm-hmm. Under 5.
Right. But the hospital that we went to, the emergency had, there was literally a kid with like a missing limb and blood and mothers wailing. It was traumatizing there. Like, I almost felt like maybe we shouldn't be here because our kids only have a fever. Like, it was very traumatic kind of thing.
Yeah, and they don't, unlike a lot of first world medicine, where it's usually about comfort and stuff like that, that's not the case in more third world countries.
Yeah.
It's very much about taking your time and efficiency.
Yeah.
With the doctors?
Yeah.
And the nurses?
and get needles on me.
Where were your needles?
And over here.
Yeah.
And then it's rapid.
Oh.
Owie! And then six.
The IV was definitely traumatizing for our kids. They ended up having to be on IV because they were dehydrated from the vomiting and stuff like that was going on because of the bacterial thing. So they were hooked up to IV, and they had to keep redoing it. It felt very inexperienced, and that's going to happen with any hospital. We're not just bashing Bolivia Hospital. This was one hospital to begin with. There are plenty other hospitals, plenty of experienced nurses and doctors here. But from our experience, this hospital lacked a little bit of that. At least that's how I felt. Like, I don't know how you felt.
No, it felt a little bit of that especially when it came to administering needles and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It felt like they missed or something always fell out. It was a little bit odd.
Yeah. I think the biggest issue that we found with the ER was explaining. Like, this is also taking place in a language that we are not perfect in, especially medical terms. Like, it was not something that I practiced learning. I practiced getting around. I practiced, I need this, I need that. I did not know how to say, any term that they were asking. So it was really difficult, but we did end up having an English, I guess she was a pediatrician in the ER.
Yeah.
She spoke in English, so it helped us understand what was happening. But after the ER, I had to go back to the hotel with Evie, because Evie wasn't allowed in the hospital, so we had to kind of take turns taking care of the other two. And the other two were admitted almost, right away? You were there for the admission after the lab.
Yeah, no, they were admitted right away. They went to the beds. And one thing you learn quite quickly is a lot of the nursing is done by the parent or the person, guardian that's there. And that's not big. I like that concept actually a lot. I thought that was a very strong part of it, because I know in Canada, like when someone gets admitted to a hospital, like no one's there.
Right, parental stuff is kind of put to the side. The nurses take that on, they clean them, stuff like that. We did our own diapers, we did food, drinking, and giving them their oral medication. That was on us to do. Mm-hmm. And they would just come by and ask, like, what's all going down? How are they doing?
Yeah.
The only thing they did was the IV bags and stuff.
Yeah. Administrating stuff that's not oral and things like that. Yeah, that's one part of it that I actually did quite prefer. When you would go to the hospital, you would plan to stay there for probably a couple days, a week, maybe.
It did seem like they were prepared to, like, we were not prepared to go to the hospital, so, and we didn't know what to expect either.
Yeah, so like when you go to a hospital, you have to basically be prepared to spend a couple days there. It's not, because the nurses there don't take care of your kid, the parent does.
Yeah.
Right, so.
Yeah, like you want to entertain them, obviously you bring your entertainment, but it's beyond that. You want to take them to the washroom. If they're potty trained, you have to have toilet paper with you, because they don't supply toilet paper, diapers, baby wipes, those kind of things. That's all on you, which for Canada, they always have backup. If you were not prepared to go to the hospital, they most times will supply you with something, right? Like there's always something that they can do. It was not that way. They were like, well, where's your diapers? And we're like, I will get some. So like there was a lot of running out of the hospital, quickly grabbing this, running back into the hospital. Even when we had to do samples and stuff, we had to go get the lab cups and
Yeah.
stuff like that. You had to run out of the hospital, go pick up the stuff for that, and then you had to collect the samples and then give it to them.
Mhm.
But yeah, and even with Titus, when he had his lunch, when they brought the lunch, it was a really good sized meal. Like it was a bowl of soup and another bowl with rice and vegetables and a drumstick. But they didn't supply like a plastic fork or anything like that, which I was shocked at because I assume, you know, if they brought a plastic plate, you would assume there would be a plastic fork. There was nothing, and I couldn't run out to the store at the time, so Titus cleaned off his drumstick and started scooping the rice with his drumstick as a fork, and he's like, "Look, Mom!" But yeah, that was definitely something that I was surprised at. I mean, the ER and the children's ward looked very much the same, I think.
Yeah.
It was bed after bed after bed. It was very much like, I don't know, like how you would see it in older films, older movies where there was a hospital, it was, you know, one side by side.
Mhm.
Beds were all lined up instead of having any kind of private or semi-private room with multiple, like 2 beds or 3 beds. This was, all the children were in one spot. We all had our own illnesses. We, you know, everyone was kind of in one room together.
Mhm. Yeah, it's kind of like what I touched upon before.
Yeah.
Like when you go to a hospital, you expect to be there for a long time.
Yeah, which is not something that, you know, I think in Canada, at least where we were, where I have been in hospitals, they try to get you out as fast as possible.
Oh,
Here, it's not like that. They try to keep you there really long. We were supposed to at least be there for 4 days. And
yeah,
we were there for 2, and the reason we were only there for 2 is because, you know, hotel and Evie was not allowed to be in there, and they wanted to have both parents there at all times at the hospital, which makes sense, but it wasn't really doable with having a 3rd child at home.
Mhm.
So we thought the best thing that would be, the best thing to do was to contact a doctor in Pylone, which is close to where we live, and finish treatment out there. And if the doctor would be willing to do that, then it would just make things easier. Evie could stay here with Grandma, and it would just go smoother. And so we contacted the doctor. Doctor said, "Yeah, bring them on over." And so we started to try to figure out our discharge process,
Mhm.
which was, they said 20 minutes, and it took about 3-4 hours.
Mhm.
It was a whole long process. Jordan had to go, we had to first take all our papers that we had, all our documents, all our results from the labs, and we had to go run to a photocopier out of the hospital, photocopy everything, run back, and then of course we had more photocopying to do. So I think you ran out, I ran out twice, and then you ran out however many times. And then after that,
Your after all that's done, your paper goes, or your file goes upstairs, and then upstairs, the office people basically say, what are your plans with the kids? You say that we're transferring them to Pylone and that they're not held liable for anything else that goes
right,
wrong.
yeah, we had to
And-
sign a waiver
Yeah.
that they were waiving their, you know, the government had no longer had any kind of hold on this.
Yeah.
So,
And then, once that was done, we were allowed to go.
yeah. And yeah, we had a taxi that we had rented out, and he was incredible. He waited the whole time, and it was a long process. He was there at, it was 10:30. He got to the hotel, and then we went to the hospital, and it was going to be later then, so we got out, I think, around 4 o'clock, and he was incredible. He didn't go overcharge us, but we gave him some extra because it was a lot of work for him, and he kind of missed out in, you know, other taxi jobs as well, so. But yeah, once the kids were in the out of the hospital, that was something too. The IV was being administered too fast, and it started making their faces really puffy. And just because their kidney couldn't work fast enough, and so yeah, After they were taken off the IV, we went straight to Pylone. And when we got to Pylone, we went to the doctor there, and he finished off their treatment, and now they are at home, but a whole lot better. They are almost completely recovered.
Almost, yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, but we figured this is something that we need to bring up. We weren't even sure if we were going to make a video on this situation because it was pretty traumatic.
Completely different experience.
It was very different, and that's something that I thought, you know, if someone else was to choose to go to a different country, whether it's Bolivia or not, you know, the hospitals are going to be very different, and to find information out even before there's an emergency, what's a good hospital, what's not a good hospital. Because after we were talking to people about this situation, like people around here, there was a lot of talk. We had some good, like positive outcomes from this hospital, but most of them were pretty negative, that this hospital was not the place to go. And yeah. And we found that the clinic that we're going to now, he's pretty incredible. He's thorough, he does a good job, he makes sure that the kids aren't panicked in all of this. And I felt like when we were in the hospital, it was very much, they don't care whether your kid is screaming bloody murder from them, you know, like it just seemed like it was very anti-feeling, which is fine. If you gotta do a job, you gotta do a job, right? But it just seemed like there were other ways to go about it.
Yeah. Best thing to do is, along with when you're learning the language, learn a lot of the medical terms that you'll come across.
Yeah.
Because that would have made life a little bit easier for sure.
Definitely, yeah. Well, even like the mix-up where we thought they were being transferred to a different hospital when they were talking about transferring them, and it was just to a different room. You know, there's a lot of things that get lost in translation, and so it makes it very difficult to deal, especially when you're in a panic too, or when you're stressed out or worried about your children or yourself or whatever the case may be, right?
Yeah.
Makes it difficult. It's like any hospital though, right? You have your specialties, and I think that, Canada has malpractice, mistreatment, and inexperienced nurses and doctors too, same as here, but I don't know, right?
No.
Every country has their own flaws in their health system, and I just think that we experience some of the Bolivian flaws in their health system. Learn about the medical situation before you travel, and terms and stuff like that too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That is us signing off.